Captain stood in the middle of the grand hall of the Interstellar Council Embassy, and he felt very small. Around him, creatures from dozens of different worlds moved through the space like they owned it. Some were tall and thin with skin that shifted colors like oil on water. Others had multiple arms and eyes that looked in different directions at the same time. The air itself smelled strange, filled with scents that the human air filters tried hard to clean but could not fully remove. Had been sent here 3 months ago to represent Earth at the Council. It was an honor, or at least that was what his superiors said, but knew the truth. Humanity had been discovered only 3 years ago. The older species, the ones who had been traveling between stars for thousands of years, did not see humans as equals. They saw humans as something new and strange, a species that had finally learned to leave their home world and now needed to be shown how things worked. The reception hall was enormous. The ceiling stretched up for what looked like 50 meters, and the floor was made of something that looked like glass but felt warm under his feet. Lights hung from nowhere, just floating in the air and creating a soft glow that made everything look almost dreamlike. Long tables covered in food stood against the walls. Most of it did not recognize. He had learned quickly that eating alien food was a good way to make political friends, but it was also a good way to end up with a stomach that hurt for 2 days afterward. Wore his dress uniform, the white and blue suit that showed he was human military. It made him stand out even more than his face did. Most of the other species here were dressed in their own ways. Some wore no clothing at all. Others wore fabric that seemed to float around them without being attached to their bodies. Looked like what he was, a human from a young species that had only recently learned to leave home. An ambassador walked past him and noticed the way the alien's eyes did not even stop on him. It was a look he had grown used to. It was the look of someone who saw something that did not matter very much, told himself not to care. He was here to do a job. He was here to learn about the galaxy and help Earth find its place in it. What other species thought about humans did not have to matter. The reception was for a new alliance between 3 older species. The Neons and the had joined together for trade. It was not a big deal in the larger scheme of things, but the council wanted to make sure everyone knew about it. So they threw a party and invited representatives from all the other species, including humans. Was standing near one of the food tables, holding a plate with something that was blue and square, when he noticed the change in the room. The sound of conversation dropped. The other aliens stopped moving for just a moment. It was like the whole room had taken a breath and held it. Looked toward the entrance. A group of tall beings had entered the hall. They were dressed in formal clothing that looked like it was made from light itself. Their skin was a deep purple color, and their features were sharp and elegant. These had studied them in his briefing materials. They were one of the older species, with a culture that went back very far into history. They had music and art and philosophy. They had rules about honor and tradition that were strict and could not be broken. In the middle of the group was a female. She was younger than the others, her skin a brighter shade of purple. She wore a crown made of something that caught the light and made it dance across her face. This had to be Princess. Had read about her. She was the youngest daughter of the Emperor. She was here to represent her people's interests in the council. The princess walked into the room with the kind of confidence that came from knowing your family had ruled for thousands of years. Her guards walked behind her, and the other in her group spread out around her like they were protecting something valuable, which they were. A princess was important to her people. Watched her move through the room. She nodded to the other ambassadors. She said words in the universal translator language, her voice smooth and careful. She was doing what politicians did. She was making sure everyone knew she was here and that she mattered. Then her eyes found him. Felt it like a physical thing, like a sudden change in the temperature of the room. The princess's eyes locked onto his face and her entire body went still. Her skin color started to change. It went from the bright purple she had been showing to something pale and blue. Her mouth opened slightly, and she stared at him without blinking. Did not know what to do. He still held his plate with the blue square food on it. He thought about raising his hand. He thought about walking over to her, but something in her expression stopped him. She was not looking at him like the other aliens looked at him. She was not looking at him like he was something small and unimportant. She was looking at him like he was something that frightened her. The other noticed, saw them turn to look at the princess. They saw her skin color changing and her body going stiff. They started to move toward her, their faces showing worry and confusion. The princess turned away. She turned so fast that her hair flew around her face. She said something in language, something quick and urgent that the universal translator did not catch. Then she walked out of the reception hall. Her guards and the other followed her quickly, leaving the space she had occupied empty. The whole thing took maybe 10 seconds, but the room felt different now. The other ambassadors started talking again, but could tell they were talking about him. He could see them looking in his direction and then looking away quickly. He heard the word human said several times. An old with 4 arms approached. The alien's eyes were the color of steel, and they looked at him with actual interest for the first time since had arrived at the station. That was unusual, they said. The princess. She has never acted that way before. Do you know her, human? Shook his head. He set his plate down on the nearest table because his hands had started to shake a little bit. No, said, I have never met her before. Strange, they said. Very strange. She looked at you like she was seeing a ghost, like something from her nightmares had just walked into her life. They walked away, leaving standing alone in the middle of the grand hall with 100 questions in his head, and no answers to any of them. That night lay in his quarters on the human sector of the station. He looked at the small screen on his wall and searched the database. He read everything he could find about Princess. He read about her family and her education and her responsibilities. He read about history and culture. He looked for something, anything that might explain why she had looked at him that way. He found nothing that made sense. Nothing that explained why a princess had stopped in the middle of a reception and stared at him like he was the most important and most terrible thing she had ever seen. Turned off the screen and lay in the darkness. Tomorrow he would try to find answers. Tonight he could only wonder what had happened and why a being from an alien world had looked at him that way. He did not know it then, but his entire life was about to change. And it would all start with a question he could not answer. Why had the princess halted cold when she saw him the morning after the reception, was called to Commander's office? Commander was the head of all human operations on the station. She reported directly to Earth, and she made the decisions that affected every human who worked in space. Had met with her a few times since arriving, and he had learned that she was not someone who wasted time on small talk. When entered her office, he found her looking at something on a screen. She did not turn to look at him right away. She finished reading whatever was on the screen, then she touched a button and the screen went dark. Only then did she turn her attention to. Close the door, she said. Close the door behind him. Sit down, Commander said. Sat in the chair across from her desk. The office was small and plain. There were no decorations on the walls. There was nothing that suggested was a woman who cared about comfort or style. She cared about her job. What happened at the reception last night? Asked. Felt his chest get tight. He had known this was coming, but he had not been ready for it. I'm not sure what you mean, said carefully. The princess said. She looked at you and then she left. And now the embassy is requesting a private meeting with you. They were very specific about it. They said it had to be you and they said it had to be soon. So I am asking you again. What happened at the reception? I do not know, said, and it was the truth. I was standing by the food. She came in, she looked at me. Her skin changed color, then she left. I never spoke to her. I never went near her. I do not understand why she reacted that way. Commander leaned back in her chair. She looked at for a long time without speaking. Then she opened a drawer in her desk and pulled out a small device. She placed it on the desk between them. This is a scrambler, said. It keeps conversations from being recorded or listened to. Once I turn it on, nothing we say in this room can be heard outside this room. That is important because I am about to tell you something that the Interstellar Council does not want you to know. They do not want anyone to know. She pressed a button on the device, and it made a soft humming sound. What I am about to tell you is classified, said. It is information that Earth's government has known about for 2 years, and we have kept it secret until now. Are you ready to hear this? Nodded slowly. The people have ancient texts, said. Religious texts, historical texts, prophetic texts. In those texts there is a prophecy. It is very old. It goes back more than 10,000 years. The prophecy speaks of something called the Marked One. The prophecy says that one day a species from would send one of their kind out into the galaxy. This being, the Marked One, would have certain qualities. The prophecy describes very specific things. It describes the way the being would look. It describes the feeling that other beings would have when they saw the Marked One. Paused. She pulled out a tablet and showed it too. On the screen there was text in language, and below it was a translation. Read, and when the dark grows long and the light begins to fade, the Marked One shall come from the world of pain and suffering. The Marked One shall carry in their spirit the strength of 1,000 trials. When eyes fall upon the Marked One, the truth shall be known. That was written 10,000 years ago, said. When the found humans 3 years ago, they kept that prophecy quiet. They did not want other species to know. But they have been watching you. They have been watching all of us. They think you might be the one from the prophecy. Felt cold. He felt like the room had gotten smaller. That is insane, he said. I am just a human. I am just a soldier. I am nothing special. The do not see it that way, said. And there is something else you need to know, something that makes this less about prophecy and more about survival. 5 months ago, we detected an anomaly at the edge of the galaxy, a dark energy wave. It was first spotted by scientists, but they told the Council about it. The Council has been tracking it since then. Turned her tablet and showed a chart. There was a shape on it, something that looked like a dark cloud, and it was moving slowly through space toward the inhabited regions of the galaxy. This anomaly is expanding, said. It moves slowly, but it moves. The scientists say that in 2 years it will reach the inhabited worlds. The Council does not know what it is. They do not know where it came from, but they know something that they have only told us. They told us because they believe you might be important to what happens next. What did they tell you? Asked. They told us, said slowly, that this is not a natural phenomenon. They have ancient records that speak of something called the architects, an old species older than anyone. The architects built things. They built structures that lasted for millions of years, and according to the records, the architects built a weapon that was supposed to stay dormant until a specific threat appeared, a weapon that was designed to protect the galaxy. Was starting to understand why had turned on the scrambler. The anomaly is the weapon, asked. The anomaly is the weapon, confirmed. And it is waking up. It is exactly like what the ancient prophecies said would happen, and the belief that the only being who can do anything about it is someone like you, someone who has the strength to survive what no other species could survive. Stood up, he could not sit anymore. He walked to the window and looked out at the stars. You are telling me, he said slowly, that an alien princess looked at me and recognized me as someone from a 10,000-year-old prophecy. You are telling me that the galaxy might be about to be destroyed by an ancient weapon, and you are telling me that everyone thinks I am supposed to stop it. That is correct, said. Why? Turned back to face her. Why me? Why not someone stronger? Why not someone older and wiser? Why a human? Why me? Stood up and walked to the window next to him. Because humans come from a harsh world, said. A world where survival means being strong enough to face suffering and keep going anyway. A world where weakness means death. That world made your kind into something special. They understood this 10,000 years ago when they wrote the prophecy. They understood that when the time came for the galaxy to face something terrible, the being who could help would be someone who had learned to survive when everything was against them. The princess looked at you and saw something in you that the rest of us cannot see. She saw the person the prophecy spoke about. She saw hope. "What do you want me to do?" asked. "The embassy has asked to meet with you," said. "They have offered you complete information about the prophecy, the anomaly, and the architects. They have asked if you would be willing to listen. They have asked if you would be willing to consider their request." Paused. What they have not said directly, but what is clear between the lines, is that they want you to go to the anomaly. They want you to find a way to stop it. "I cannot do that," said. "That is impossible." "Maybe," said, "but they believe you can. And the truth is nobody else can even try. If you refuse, then in 2 years the anomaly will reach inhabited space, and unless something changes, billions of lives will end. That is what is at stake here." Looked back out at the stars. Somewhere out there in the darkness, something was moving toward the light, something old and powerful and full of purpose, and somehow he was supposed to stop it. "When do they want to meet?" he asked. "Tonight," said. "In a private chamber on their diplomatic vessel, just you and the princess. She wants to explain everything herself." That night went to meet with Princess, knowing that his entire life had changed and not knowing if he had the strength to handle what was coming next. The diplomatic vessel was massive. It stretched across the docking bay like a building made of crystal and light. Had never been inside one before. As he walked through the corridors, he noticed that everything was beautiful in a way that human technology was not. The walls seemed to glow from inside. The air was clean and cool. Everything felt old and expensive and important. A guard led him to a private chamber. The guard said nothing to him. They had a culture of silence that did not fully understand. The guard opened a door and gestured for to enter. Then the door closed behind him. Princess stood on the other side of the room, looking out a large window that showed the station and the stars beyond it. She was wearing different clothing now, something simpler than what she had worn at the reception. Her purple skin seemed to glow in the soft light of the chamber. "Captain," she said without turning around, "thank you for coming." Her voice was different from what I'd expected. It was quieter. It was more real than the official voice she had used at the reception. "I was told you wanted to meet with me," said. Turned to face him. Up close, he could see that she looked tired. There were dark lines under her eyes. Her skin color was not as bright as it had been at the reception. "I did," she said. "I apologize for my reaction to you at the reception. It was not polite. It was not the way a princess should behave. But when I saw you, I could not stop myself. You matched the description from the prophecy so closely that I could not believe it was real." "Commander told me about the prophecy," said. "She told me that I might be the marked one. I do not understand this. I do not believe in prophecies. I am a human soldier. That is all I am." Moved closer to him. She studied his face carefully, like she was trying to see something inside him. "A prophecy is not magic," she said. "A prophecy is simply knowledge that was learned long ago and written down. Our ancestors understood things that we have forgotten. They saw patterns in time and in human nature. They made predictions based on what they knew. Most of those predictions were wrong, but some of them were right. And this one, the prophecy about the marked one, I believe this one will be right." "Because I match a description?" asked. "Because you are human," said. "Because you come from a world that destroys everything weak and leaves only the strong. And because something is coming that will destroy everything unless someone stops it. This is not magic. This is simple thinking. This is understanding what kind of being would have the strength to do what must be done." Walked to a table and activated a screen that showed the same image had seen in Commander's office. The dark anomaly, spreading slowly through space. "Do you know what this is?" asked. "Commander told me it was an ancient weapon," said. "A weapon built by people called the architects." "Yes," said, "and she told you it was waking up." "She did." Skin color shifted, becoming darker, more serious. What she did not tell you, said, is that my people have been watching this for 10 years, not 5 months, 10 years. We watched it wake up slowly, and we did not tell the council because we knew what they would do. They would panic. They would fight each other over what to do. They would argue about which species was responsible. And while they argued, the anomaly would continue to grow. She touched the screen and made the image larger. The architects were not like the species that exist now, continued. They were older, they were more advanced. They understood things about the galaxy that we have forgotten. They understood that something was coming, something dangerous, something that could destroy everything. So they built a weapon. They built this anomaly as a tool to protect the galaxy. They set it to activate only when certain conditions were met. And now those conditions have been met. What conditions? Asked. I do not know exactly, said, and heard frustration in her voice. The knowledge was lost thousands of years ago, but the architects must have believed that the threat would eventually come, and they must have believed that the weapon needed to activate at exactly the right time. If it activated too early, it would destroy everything it was supposed to protect. If it activated too late, the threat would already have won. Turned away from the screen. I came to the council expecting to find allies, she said. I came here hoping that the older species would work together to understand what the anomaly is and how to stop it. Instead, I found denial. I found political games. I found species that wanted to ignore the problem and hope it went away. She looked at again, and her eyes were hard. And then I saw you. And I understood why my ancestors wrote the prophecy, because they knew that when this moment came, the only being who could help would be someone from a species that understood pain, someone from a species that had learned to survive when everything wanted them to fail. What do you want from me? Asked, though he thought he already knew the answer. I want you to go to the anomaly, said. I want you to travel to its center. I want you to find out what the architects built and why. And I want you to find a way to stop it or to control it or to do whatever must be done. That is impossible, said. I am not a scientist. I am not an engineer. I am a soldier. What can I do against something that ancient and that powerful? I do not know, said. But nobody else can do it. Other species would be destroyed by the energy. Other species do not have the strength to survive what the anomaly will do to their bodies and minds. But humans are different. Humans come from a world that breaks other species. Humans come from a world that teaches them to keep going even when they think they cannot. She moved closer to him. I do not know if you can succeed, she said. I have doubt, but the alternative is to let the anomaly destroy everything, and I cannot accept that. I will not accept that. If there is even a small chance that you can help, then you must try. Felt the weight of her words. He felt the weight of 10,000 years of prophecy. He felt the weight of billions of lives that depended on someone being brave enough to try something impossible. If I agree to this, he said, I will need help, I will need information, I will need resources. You will have everything, said. My empire has been preparing for this moment for years. We have ships and technology. We have knowledge from the ancient texts. We have everything you need. And you believe I can do this? Asked. Was quiet for a moment. I believe that you are the only one who can, she said finally. That is not the same as believing you will succeed, but it is all I have to hold on to. Looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the anomaly was moving. Somewhere out there, the fate of the galaxy was being decided by a weapon that nobody understood anymore. I will do it, he said. I will try to do what you are asking. Skin color brightened. She reached out and put her hand on his shoulder. Thank you, she said. You have just saved the galaxy, or you have just walked toward your own death. Time will tell which one is true. They stood together in silence, looking out at the stars, knowing that everything would change now. The next 6 weeks were the hardest of his life. He had trained as a soldier, but this was different. This was not about learning how to fight or how to follow orders. This was about learning to think in ways he had never thought before. The scholars brought him ancient texts. They showed him images and descriptions of the architects. They told him stories that had been passed down for thousands of years. Most of what they told him did not make sense. The architects seemed to be less like a normal species and more like something from mythology. They could build structures that lasted millions of years. They could create weapons that would remain dormant for ages and still function perfectly. They could see the future and plan for threats that would not arrive for 10,000 years. One of the scholars was named David Collins. He was young, even younger than, and he spoke with a slight accent that made his words sound strange. David had spent his entire life studying the architects, and he believed that they were not magical or godlike. He believed they were simply more advanced. The architects understood the nature of the galaxy, David told one day. They were in a training chamber that they had set up for him. They understood that patterns repeat. They understood that civilizations rise and fall. They understood that the same types of threats appear again and again across time. So they built a system to protect against those threats. But they could not predict exactly when the threat would come, said. So they built the weapon to be smart enough to wait for the right moment to activate. Exactly, David said. The weapon is not just a bomb. It is a system. It is designed to understand its environment and to know when to activate based on what it senses in the galaxy. Was also training with military specialists. They taught him how to survive in environments that would kill normal humans. They taught him meditation and breathing techniques that would help him stay calm when his body was being destroyed. They taught him how to use technology that was far more advanced than anything Earth had developed. But more than the training, more than the knowledge, felt the weight of what was coming. Every night he went to sleep thinking about the anomaly. Every morning he woke up thinking about the billions of lives that depended on him. The fear was like a stone in his chest that he could not move. One night he received a message from Commander. It was a video message, and her face filled the screen in his private quarters. She said, "I am sending this because I am no longer going to be your direct superior. I have been removed from my position. The council discovered that I told you about the prophecy and about the anomaly. They say I violated protocol by sharing classified information with you. The truth is that they are afraid. They are afraid of what you might discover. They are afraid that you might actually succeed, and that would change everything they believe about humans." She paused and could see sadness in her face. "But I do not regret telling you," she continued, "because what is happening matters, the prophecy matters, and you matter. You are not the chosen one from some ancient story. You are just a human. You are just a person who was brave enough to say yes when everything was asking you to run away. I believe in what you are doing. Earth believes in what you are doing. The government of Earth has decided to support your mission openly. We are saying to the galaxy that humanity stands with you. And we are proud of you." The video ended, sat in the darkness of his quarters and felt tears on his face. He did not usually cry, but tonight he cried. 2 weeks before his departure, had a final meeting with Princess. She showed him the ship that would take him to the anomaly. It was small, designed to be fast and to protect him from the energy waves that surrounded the anomaly. Engineers had worked day and night to prepare it. They had combined human and technology in ways that nobody had thought were possible. "This ship will get you close," said, "but the rest you will have to do alone. Nobody else can survive inside the anomaly. The ship can protect your body, but your mind will have to go further." "I understand," said. "Do you?" asked. "Do you understand that you might die? Do you understand that you might reach the center and find nothing? Do you understand that your people will never know what happened to you if this fails?" "Yes," said. "And you still want to do this?" asked. Looked at the ship. He thought about Earth. He thought about the billions of human lives down on that distant world. He thought about all the other worlds that would be destroyed if he did not try. "I have to," he said. Skin color shifted to a pale blue. She was showing emotion, had learned. It was the way. "You are braver than you think," she said. "Or you are crazier than you think. I am not certain which." "Maybe both," said. The night before his departure, went to the viewing deck of the station. He stood and looked out at the stars. He thought about his family on Earth. He thought about the people he had trained with. He thought about Commander and David Collins and Princess. He thought about all of it, and he tried to be ready for what was coming next. A voice came from behind him. "I thought I would find you here." Turned, it was David Collins. "I wanted to say goodbye," David said, "and I wanted to give you something." David handed a small object. It was a stone, dark and smooth, with symbols carved into it. "This is from my people," David said. "It is very old. It is supposed to bring clarity to the mind and strength to the body. I do not know if such things are real, but I believe they can be if you believe they are. Take it with you. When you are in the anomaly and you are afraid, hold this stone and remember that people are thinking about you. Remember that people believe in you." Took the stone and held it in his hand. It was warm. "Thank you," he said. "Do not thank me," David said. "Just come back alive. Just come back and tell me everything you have seen. Just come back so that we can all know that it was possible." The next morning, boarded the ship. He set the course toward the anomaly, and as the station fell away behind him, he held the stone in his hand and thought about faith and hope and the terrible strength that it takes to keep moving forward when you are afraid. The journey to the anomaly took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of traveling through empty space, watching the darkness grow larger on his screens. 3 weeks of listening to the sound of the ship's engines and thinking about everything that could go wrong. The anomaly did not look like a weapon. It looked like a shadow that had learned to grow. On the screens, could see it spreading slowly through the void, consuming light and energy wherever it touched. It was beautiful in the way that a storm is beautiful. It was terrible in the way that nothing should be terrible. As moved closer, the ship's sensors began to show him what the anomaly was made of. It was not solid matter. It was energy. It was a wave of pure power that had been expanding for 10,000 years, waiting for the right moment to activate fully and spread across the galaxy. Entered the outer edge of the anomaly, and immediately his ship began to shake. The energy tried to break through the shields, tried to destroy the human and technology that protected him. Red lights filled the cabin. Warnings screamed from every speaker. Held the stone that David Collins had given him and kept moving forward. The pain started when he was halfway to the center. It was not pain in his body. His body was protected by the ship. It was pain in his mind. The anomaly was sending out signals, waves of information that his brain was trying to process and understand. It was like listening to 1,000 conversations at the same time. It was like standing inside a library where every book was screaming at you. Screamed, he could not help it. He screamed and held onto the controls of his ship and kept moving forward, because stopping was not an option. Stopping was death for billions of beings. The closer he got to the center, the clearer the messages began to understand what he was hearing. The anomaly was not sending random information. It was sending memories. It was sending images and thoughts and emotions from a being that had died millions of years ago. The being was the architect who had designed this weapon, and the being was still here, trapped inside the weapon, conscious and waiting for someone to hear. Reached the center of the anomaly, and his ship entered a space that nothing should have been able to survive. The protection systems failed. The shields failed, but was still alive. And that was when he understood that the anomaly was not trying to kill him. It was trying to talk to him. In the center of the anomaly, found a chamber, a real, physical place made of stone and ancient metal. The chamber was huge, big enough to hold 1,000 ships, and standing in the center of the chamber was a figure made of light. Understood that the light was not the architect. The architect had been dead for millions of years, but the consciousness of the architect remained. It had been preserved inside the weapon, waiting for someone to arrive and listen to its story. The consciousness spoke to not in words but in images and feelings, saw the architects as they had been. They were not gods. They were beings like any other beings, beings who had wanted to survive, beings who had made mistakes. They had built an empire that stretched across thousands of worlds. They had believed that they would last forever. But they had been wrong. Something had come, something old and terrible and hungry. The architects called it the Void. It was a parasite, something that consumed entire civilizations from inside, turning them against themselves, destroying everything that made them strong. The architects had tried to fight it. Hundreds of thousands of them had died fighting it, and slowly they were losing. So the last architect, the one whose consciousness was still preserved in this chamber, had made a decision. She had built a weapon that would not just destroy the Void but would prevent anything like the Void from ever threatening the galaxy again. She had built the anomaly, and she had set it to activate only when the conditions were right, only when a species from a species that had learned to survive the impossible had evolved enough to exist in the galaxy. And she had written a prophecy, a message in a bottle cast through time, hoping that one day a being would arrive who was strong enough to understand what needed to be done. The consciousness showed the purpose of the weapon. The anomaly was not designed to destroy. It was designed to heal. It was designed to cleanse the galaxy of parasites and corruption, and the subtle ways that the Void infected other species. It could purify the galaxy, but the process would be violent. It would cause pain, and entire civilizations might be damaged in the process. Or the consciousness showed another option. The weapon could be, the architect had built in that possibility, but reprogramming it would require someone to understand the weapon at its deepest level. It would require someone to be able to think like an architect, to see solutions that no normal being could see. It would require someone who understood that survival sometimes meant finding a way forward when no obvious path existed. Understood what he had to do. He held the stone from David Collins and opened his mind to the consciousness of the architect. He let the ancient knowledge flow into him. He understood circuits of power that had been forgotten for millions of years. He understood the mathematical language that the architects had used to build their systems. And slowly, his human mind and the architect consciousness began to work together. They did not think the same way, but they understood each other. The human understood persistence and creativity. The architect understood power and design. Together, they were something that neither could be alone. The anomaly. The transformation began slowly and then became faster. The dark shadow that had been spreading through space began to change. It began to emit light instead of darkness. It began to broadcast energy that healed instead of destroyed. Across the galaxy, worlds that had been damaged by cosmic radiation began to heal. Civilizations that had been slowly dying from genetic damage began to recover. The anomaly became a beacon of light spreading across the galactic sphere. Felt the process drain him completely. He felt his body breaking down. He thought he was going to die in that chamber surrounded by the light of the ancient architect, and he was ready to die if it meant the galaxy would be saved. But the consciousness of the architect would not let him die. She had spent millions of years maintaining that chamber, keeping it alive, waiting for someone to come. She had one final task left. She gave the last of her energy too. She saved his life by letting her consciousness fade away completely, giving everything she had to protect the human who had done what the prophecy had promised. When woke up, he was in his ship and the chamber was behind him. The anomaly was no longer dark. It was bright and beautiful and full of purpose, and was still alive. The journey back to the station took 3 weeks, 3 weeks of healing and trying to understand what had happened to him. When arrived, Princess was waiting for him at the docking bay. She looked at him the same way she had looked at him at the reception, like she was seeing something impossible, like she was seeing the future. "You did it," she said. "The prophecy was real. You saved the galaxy." "I did not do it alone," said. "The architect helped me. She was still there, waiting for someone to listen." That knight stood on the viewing deck with and looked out at the stars. The anomaly was visible as a distant light, spreading across space, healing the galaxy. And for the first time since arriving at the station, felt like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. "Thank you," said. "Thank you for believing, thank you for being brave." "Thank you for recognizing me," said. "Thank you for giving me a reason to try when I wanted to give up." They stood together in the darkness, watching the light spread across the galaxy, knowing that they had done something that would matter for millions of years to come. The prophecy had been fulfilled. The marked one had come from and the galaxy would never be the same.